Hello everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, and today I felt like kind of just throwing together a casual little video. Several people kind of gave me the idea to make this video. In the last kind of podcast I did, some people thought it was kind of strange and weird, my introduction to the Zelda series, and I kind of realized I've never really publicly talked about, how I got into Zelda, why I like it, why I don't really like it anymore, my opinions on particular games in general. So anyone who's interested in my personal opinions or how I came to the Zelda series and why I started Hyrule Conquest and all my games and stuff, I guess this is the video for you. It's not heavily scripted, although I have a little bit of notes off to the side. But this video I consider really casual, so it'll probably feel a little sloppy, and I'm kind of off the cuff. I'll probably stumble and blabber here and there, but this is a video about how I encountered the Zelda series, my kind of broad opinion on the series. I will kind of rank each Zelda game, sort of, and I'll explain a lot of the things I like about the series, a lot of the things I hate about it, and everything in between. So let's get started. I guess I will tell my little story on how I discovered Zelda, which I told the story on the E3 podcast I did with several other people a few days ago, and everyone thought it was kind of bizarre, and I guess it is kind of weird. But so somehow through most of the 90s, I had no idea what Nintendo was. Somehow, when I was a little kid, my father got the TurboGrafx 16, which is a really, really old console, which makes him and me sound really hipster. So that was the first console I had. But my first real introduction to video games was actually SimCity. SimCity was the very first video game I ever played. So I was mostly a PC gamer through the 90s, and it's kind of funny how I've come full circle. I almost play nothing but PC games now. Most console games just don't really do it for me anymore. So I went through most of the 90s not even knowing Nintendo was a thing, which sounds completely strange, but you need to understand, I had no internet, and apparently the schools I went to, the kids probably played Nintendo, but no one seemed to talk about it. Video games were actually an extremely kind of personal but minor part of my life when I was growing up. I just kind of played video games at home to myself and didn't really talk about them with anyone, which is kind of strange when I think about it. But I first kind of so it's not entirely true that I didn't know Nintendo didn't exist in the 90s. I was very aware of Pokemon. In fact, I liked Pokemon when it kind of exploded in the 90s. I played the red and blue versions when it came out, and I watched the silly anime show on TV. But I didn't it never crossed my mind that there was this company called Nintendo that had all these different franchises and properties and stuff, basically until the Nintendo 64 came out. And I don't remember any commercials or advertisement or anything about the N64 came out. Just my father brought it home one day, and we just had an N64 sometime in, I want to say, 1998. So I was probably 10 or 11 around then. I might have been 12, somewhere around that age. So yeah, my father just brought home the N64 one day, and he also got Super Mario 64, which probably came with the console, and it also had Castlevania 64 and Ocarina of Time, and he had the Ocarina of Time walkthrough thing, not the Nintendo Power one, the one that was actually written by the people that made the game. So the very first thing of Zelda I ever saw was that picture of Link with the bow and arrow on the cover of that guide. And my first reaction when I saw it was something along the lines of, I don't want to play as a girl elf. I don't want to play this game. So right away, right off the very bat, I kind of had a childlike hostility to the Zelda series. It didn't seem interesting at all. I ended up playing Super Mario 64, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really love it, and I haven't played any other Mario games since then, other than the one of the ones on the Game Boy. I don't hate Mario at all. I just don't like Mario. He never appealed to me even when I was young. But then I played Castlevania 64, and it was garbage, as most people know. I remember playing for like 2 or 3 hours and just utterly hating the game. So I'm already having a really lackluster introduction to the N64, and then I decided, okay, I'll give this Zelda game a shot, and I was kind of obviously blown away by the game. I really saying I liked the game is kind of an understatement. I kind of became unhealthily obsessed with it, and for the longest time, Ocarina of Time was kind of my favorite thing, and Zelda in general was my favorite fictional thing for about a decade. Basically from Ocarina of Time until around the time of Spirit Tracks. If someone asked me what's your like favorite fictional thing in the world, I'd just hands down be like, oh, Zelda, with probably Star Trek in like second place. But so yeah, Ocarina of Time was my introduction to the series, and that's how I discovered Nintendo, and that's how I got into console gaming too. Because again, I had a TurboGrafx and a later Sega Genesis when I was growing up, but I was never really interested in either of them. Although I highly recommend trying out the games on the TurboGrafx system. They're actually really good. Alien Crush is one of the coolest pinball games ever. If you love Fire Emblem or Advanced Wars, I recommend getting Military Madness on the TurboGrafx. It's pretty much the game that inspired Advanced Wars. It's really great. There's a lot of pretty good games on the TurboGrafx, but that is going off topic. So yeah, that is how I got into Zelda. So, I kind of divide the Zelda series into three kind of broad eras. They all kind of have these. I mean, you can disagree with me, if I'm accurate with this, but there's kind of three sort of time periods where everything like kind of feels sort of similar and they're kind of different from each other. The first one I kind of just call like the creation era. This is, when the series got started. There's not really that much lore. There's not really any rules. Things aren't really established. I mean, just as an example, in the first two Zelda games, like Christianity is kind of a big thing. Like Link is running around with a cross on his shield. Like there's crucifixes and Bibles in the game. And then by the time you get to A Link to the Past, they kind of eject the real world religions with and they kind of replace it with the three goddesses, and they establish that this is its own like kind of fantasy place. It's not really Earth. So there's a lot of inconsistency with these first few games. It's kind of just the series getting its footing. So I don't really judge them very harshly for being kind of inconsistent and weird, because they probably didn't realize or intend that the series would explode after the first game came out. By the time they got to A Link to the Past, they're like, oh, let's go ahead and flesh this out and make this our own series or whatever, instead of just a bunch of random fantasy tropes and ideas thrown in a blender. So these games they all kind of have a general feeling of, we're just kind of throwing this together and seeing what happens. That's kind of how I describe those four games. And then around the time Ocarina of Time comes out, this era I kind of call the refinement era, where they kind of nail down the lore and the feeling of the series, I guess you could say. Rules are kind of laid down and established. The Triforce is a thing. They don't do a particularly good job at explaining how the Triforce works, but you kind of get a sense of how the Triforce works. You get a sense of the mythology of Hyrule. Like you have the three goddesses, and then there's the triad of Link and Zelda and Ganondorf. The Master Sword is kind of plugged into the lore for good, although it did appear before then. But the Temple of Time becomes a thing. A lot of the kind of iconic things that are recurring in the series like sort of popped up in this sort of era here. and it really feels like they're just kind of slowly fleshing out the lore and the background and everything. The series basically starts to feel more consistent. It starts to feel more than just like a little video game with no real direction. It feels like there's kind of a general direction that they're going in, with some exceptions like Wind Waker. Although even Wind Waker does a pretty good job with building on the lore and whatnot. So I mean, if you're new and you don't know anything about me, this kind of era is where I feel like the Zelda series was at its best, and it kind of peaked with Twilight Princess. And then we get into what I guess I would consider the sort of modern era of Zelda games, and I call it the degeneration sort of era. And I know that name has a negative connotation. I actually don't mean it in a negative way, even though I don't like almost all of the games here. I call it the degeneration because it's kind of a time when they start throwing all of the rules out the window and kind of doing whatever the hell they want. Like Skyward Sword is a great example. They basically just it's basically a reboot. They completely and utterly rewrite the entire backstory and mythology to Hyrule. They introduce Hylia and Demise and the Curse of Demise, and they basically throw almost everything away that they established earlier on. And almost every game that comes out in this time period is like that. A Link Between Worlds kind of just tosses out the things that were established in A Link to the Past. Like, I think in the end of A Link to the Past, it basically says the Master Sword will sleep forever. It'll never, come out again and be used. So it's kind of strange that in this immediate sequel to A Link to the Past, Link's running around with the Master Sword again. So I don't know. There, obviously Hyrule Warriors is a spin-off, so I guess I won't really count its blatant rule tossing. I don't know. I guess I won't really count that one. Breath of the Wild tosses a lot of things out the window. Even I'm not even talking about like the lore in the background. Like the gameplay is completely. They basically abandoned almost everything established before and like, let's do something new. And I'm not necessarily faulting them for that, but the point is, whether you like it or not, and I personally don't like it, you might like it, whether you like it or not, this kind of time period is just them abandoning everything they worked to build up here and just throwing random things at the wall and seeing what sticks and doesn't stick. So I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just makes me kind of miss what they were going for. So that's kind of how I divide up the Zelda series, these three broad sort of eras. So I guess I will start going on about the specific games and ranking them, and I'll kind of say why I like them or why I don't, and etc. So I know Nephy the hipster. I don't give number scores. I don't fault people for giving numeric scores to video games and whatnot. I personally just think it's impossible to quantify really any kind of subjective experience. I mean, there's objective things in a game, but personal taste kind of colors a lot of opinions on video games. So I kind of just have these vague, it's good, it's decent, it's okay, it's lame, and I don't like it. Just kind of general sort of categories. And even for games I like, there's completely different reasons that I like certain games, which is why I would hesitate to give them numeric scores. Like, what's an example? I love Twilight Princess, but I actually don't like the music at all in Twilight Princess. Whereas Minish Cap, I think, has the best soundtrack in the entire game. So even games I absolutely love, there's things in them that I think are pretty terrible. So yeah, I don't want to give a numeric score. I kind of just, if it's good, I'll say it's good. If it's not good, I'll say it's not good. And it's up to you to kind of, I guess, pick I don't know, it's my opinion, so I guess you don't need to use my opinion to come to your own. This is just for people who are, for whatever reason, are interested in my personal opinion. You shouldn't let my opinion kind of dictate which games are good or bad in your opinion. But anyway, I'm just going to go in the order that the games came out. because it's a little easier, and I don't entirely remember the order I played them in. I know I started with Ocarina of Time, and then I went to Majora's Mask and whatnot. I have a general idea of the order I played them in, but for the sake of ease, I'm just going to start from Zelda 1, go to Zelda 2, and then end up at Breath of the Wild. I will cover some of the spin-offs, the ones that I played anyway, like Hyrule Warriors. But anyway, we'll start with Zelda 1. I don't like Zelda 1, actually. Already we're starting off negative. But even when I was young, I think it was the third or fourth Zelda game I played. I got the version that came out on the Game Boy Advance. I was excited to play it. I'm like, oh man, I've never been able to find the original Zelda game, and I saw it at a GameStop on the Game Boy, and it was only like, I think $5 or $10. So I was thrilled. I'm like, finally, I get to play the first Zelda game that there ever was. And I remember putting it in, and after 10 minutes, just being like, this kind of sucks. I'm willing to kind of blame it on the fact that this game was just before my time. This game came out, I think, a year or two before I was born. I don't entirely think that's my problem with it, though, because there's a lot of very old games that I actually think hold up despite the fact that they're ancient. Like the original Metroid, I actually think holds up relative to its age compared to the original Legend of Zelda. So I'm not entirely sure if that's my complete problem with this game. I think its biggest problem is the controls. There's so many times in this game that I felt like I died because I pressed a button and it didn't quite do exactly what I wanted, which is kind of a similar critique I have of the second Zelda game. There's like no real story in this game. I'm not gonna fault this game for not having a story because it's extremely old, and most games back then didn't really have one. But there wasn't anything outside of the gameplay to keep me attached. And it sounds really petty, but like I remember when I was a kid and I first played it, and I got to Aquamentus, and I'm like, why is there no boss music? Like I knew the game was old, but I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that something as simple as boss music didn't even play. So this game felt incredibly old when I played it. I feel like it hasn't aged well. I respect its kind of historical impact on the kind of gaming industry, so I would say it's worth checking out just to see, what started everything. I would treat it as, like something you look at in a museum, like, oh, that's cool, that's fascinating. I don't necessarily think it's pretty, but that's a cool piece of history. So that's how I'd treat Zelda 1, just kind of like a little piece of history. I don't like the game. I'll never play it again, so I'm just going to kind of put it in the lame category. I didn't enjoy it. I'll never touch it again. Check it out if you want to see the history of the series, though, and where it all started. So, second up is Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, which have a lot of the same problems with this game as the first one, but I actually think it's significantly better than the original Zelda game. Not necessarily because of the change in gameplay, because like the first game, I feel like the difficulty in it is extremely artificial. There are countless times in the game where I was injured or killed because I pressed jump and Link didn't quite jump in the way that I intended. So this game has kind of a cheap feeling to it as far as the difficulty. I don't like that. I hold that against, this game and the first Zelda game. But there's a little bit of a story going on. I like the introduction of Dark Link. I don't really have too much to say about it though, because it is an incredibly simplistic game. I like it enough to where I wouldn't put it, the same kind of low level as the first Zelda game. I kind of just think it's meh. It's painfully average. It feels like an old game, not quite as bad as the first. I know a lot of people disagree with me. A lot of people don't like the second Zelda game, but I actually think it's okay. But I don't think I'll go back and play it again. So yeah, we're off to a really really negative start. But things are gonna do a 180 because A Link to the Past. I love this game. This was, I think, the fourth Zelda game I played. I started with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and then I stumbled onto Link's Awakening, and then actually no, I take that back. I played this one before Link's Awakening because at the time I had a neighbor who had a Super Nintendo, and he had A Link to the Past on it, and every now and again I'd go to his house and I'd play it, although I never got very far in it. And then years later, I got the one that came out on the Game Boy Advance, and that's when I finally was able to play through the whole game. So A Link to the Past basically has none of the problems I have with these first two games. The controls are just pretty much perfect. I never felt like I died because the controls were not obeying me. If I died, it's because I did something stupid, and I was able to correct it, after I figured out what I was doing wrong. So this game controls great. I like the sprites a lot in it. They're pretty great. It's what else about it? It kind of finally establishes the kind of basic lore of the series. It introduces the goddesses, the Triforce. I mean, the Triforce was in the first two Zelda games, but it's the first time we have like the actual the three triangles. They go into a little bit of detail on the backstory of Ganon. They introduce Aghanim, who, while he is technically Ganon, I kind of consider him a sort of separate character, and I think he's actually kind of a really underrated antagonist in the series. So I like A Link to the Past, and I think it holds up incredibly well, even though it's not particularly interesting compared to some of the later Zelda games. It feels incredibly like generic, like kind of just like a what do I want to say? It's like it feels like just a bunch of generic fantasy tropes kind of thrown together in a blender. Like, we don't have the weird fantastical races like the Gorons yet, although the River Zoras are in it, but it doesn't really feel like its own thing yet. It kind of feels like a bit of Dungeons and Dragons, a bit of Lord of the Rings. It doesn't really have a fleshed out identity other than a few icons like the Triforce and whatnot. But anyway, I still consider it a pretty good game to this day. I would have no problem pulling it out and playing this game again. So I'm gonna put it in the good category. I would play this game again. I would recommend it to anyone, whether they like Zelda or not. It's a pretty decent game. Link's Awakening. This is the third Zelda game I played. Well, again, technically the fourth. It's the third Zelda game I owned. I started with Ocarina of Time, and then I played Majora's Mask when it came out, and I don't actually remember buying this game. My memory is probably, kind of foggy, but I seem to remember it just appearing in my pile of Game Boy games one day, and I was like, wow, there's a Zelda game on the Game Boy. I didn't know that. So this game literally just magically appeared in my library one day, and I was excited, and I played it. I used to actually consider this my favorite Zelda game once upon a time, for years, and then I want to say it was around 2012 or 13, around the time Skyward Sword had came out. I went back to play it again. I hadn't played it for years, and my nostalgia goggles were kind of completely shattered, and I didn't really enjoy it coming back to it years later. I suspect I won't enjoy the new remake that's coming out either. I wouldn't say this game is very bad. It's just incredibly goofy. I'm not really a fan of the goofier games in the Zelda series. If you like them, whatever, but the gameplay is fine. The dungeons are pretty great, despite the fact that I don't like the game overall. I kind of like the gut punch ending. For some reason, I'm a fan of gut punch endings. I don't know why. So I like the way this game ends, which, spoilers for an almost 30-year-old game, everyone dies except Link at the end. Although it's arguable that Marin survives in some way. But you basically end the life of everyone on the island. So I kind of like the gut punch ending. I like the soundtrack in this game. This game has a wonderful soundtrack. Obviously, a lot of people love the Ballad of the Windfish. I think it's a great track. But the Face Shrine is one of my favorite favorite melodies in the entire series. So great soundtrack, pretty cool little dungeons, nice ending. Overall, though, it's I don't hate this game. I don't think it's as good as when I first played it. But fun little piece of trivia. When I was playing this game, I was in the car with my mother, and we were driving home from Babies R Us, and she was pregnant with my youngest sister, and I was playing this game, and we actually got into a car accident on the way home when I had just finished, I killed the first boss, which was Moldorm, and I was so excited, and right when I killed that boss and defeated the first dungeon, we got into a car accident that resulted in my youngest sister being born, so so I kind of have like this weird, I kind of associate this game with the birth of my sister for some reason because of that little incident. But yeah, Link's Awakening, meh. I'm gonna put it in the meh category. It's all right. I don't think I'll ever play it again. I'm not gonna get the remake. Even if I did enjoy this game, I don't think I would get the remake because I don't really like the way it looks. But you might enjoy it. If you're a fan of weird, goofy games, you might enjoy it. I don't really like it anymore. But anyway, now we're getting to some of the good stuff. Boomer Nephy and his Ocarina of Time. It's Ocarina of Time. I don't think you need me to say that it's a pretty great game. There's probably about 5,373,000 whatnot people on the internet going off about how this is the greatest game ever. I don't think it's the greatest game ever. I don't even think it's the best game in the Zelda series. It's my entry to the series, though, so obviously I have a bit of nostalgic attachment to it. I kind of have a feeling that this game will probably be a lot like Zelda 1, where generations after me, if they didn't play it at the time, they'll come back to it and they'll just kind of be baffled by it. Like, why did anyone like this game? Because this game really hasn't aged very well, especially in terms of the gameplay and whatnot. Obviously, graphically, it looks utterly terrible compared to some of the stuff that's coming out nowadays, but I really enjoy this game despite all of its faults. A lot of it probably is nostalgia goggles, but this game I think is kind of what really gave the series its identity and made it feel less like kind of a ripoff of other fantasy things. It kind of introduced a lot of original things that weren't in other fantasy things, like weird creatures like the Gorons. They introduced the Gerudo. I guess you could debate whether the Gerudo are original or not, but there's a lot of things in this game that made it feel kind of like its own series. Obviously, it's borrowing things from other myths and whatnot. Like the Master Sword is clearly inspired by Excalibur, so it's not entirely original. But I love this game a lot. I think the best part about this game, and it's my problem with a lot of the later games in the series, is I love the tone of this game. It's less apparent in the 3DS remake, but in the original version of the game, there's like a really bleak kind of tone to the game. There's almost like this unsettling sort of feeling that something's just kind of wrong in the world. There's just all these messed up things. Like, just as an example, there's a well in Kakariko under this little village. All the people get their water from this well, and under the well is a torture dungeon full of corpses and blood splatters everywhere, and this messed up demon and all these animated corpses and zombies, and people are just drinking water from this well. So there's like this almost Alice in Wonderland kind of feeling to this game, where there's just, the world kind of seems decent on the surface, but if you look closely, it's kind of like this really dark and messed up world, and I kind of like that. That's lacking in a lot of the other Zelda games. I kind of miss that a lot, but yeah, Ocarina of Time, I like it a lot. I've played it so much, though, that I don't think I'll ever play it again. I'm kind of sick of it, so I don't think I'll ever go back to it and play it, but despite that, I'm going to put it in the good category. If you're a lot younger than me, if you were born like after 2001 or like sometime in the mid 2000s, you might not really be able to get into this game that much. It'll probably feel really old to you, and I don't blame you, because the game really hasn't aged that well. But I still recommend trying it, kind of for the same reasons that I recommend people try the first Zelda game, even though I don't like it. Anyway, Majora's Mask. I believe I would say Majora's Mask is superior to Ocarina of Time. Funnily enough, and I think this is actually a common story, I didn't like Majora's Mask when I first played it. I'm not sure if I'd say I didn't like it. I just remember getting stuck on it constantly, and I kept abandoning it for years, and I'd come back a few years later, I'd get a little further in it, and then I'd get stuck and I'd abandon it. And it took me... See, I got it when it came out, which I think was 2000, and I beat it after I had finished Twilight Princess, so it took me like 6 or 7 years, maybe even longer than that, to finally complete this game. So, it's and I think I've heard a lot of similar stories where when people first got this game, they didn't like it, and then as they got older and they came back to it, they're like, wow, this game is better than I remembered. And it probably is because of the difficulty of it. It's kind of a difficult game. I can breeze through Ocarina of Time like in no time at all, whereas even to this day I have trouble getting through Majora's Mask. It's kind of hard, which I guess I like, but kind of like with Ocarina of Time, the reason I love this game so much is kind of just the messed up tone of it, for lack of a better term. That kind of idea I talked about in Ocarina of Time, where the world is kind of like bleak, especially like under the surface, where like behind everything in Ocarina of Time, there's like some fucked up backstory that's just really disturbing. Majora's Mask takes that and just goes all out with that idea. This game is just fucked up. I'd stayed away from it for a few years, and about a month ago I was doing some research and I was watching scenes from it. I completely forgot that Link digs a grave for a Zora that he watches die right in front of him, and then he's like crying at the grave. I'm like, that's pretty messed up for a kid's game. There's nothing like that in Zelda games anymore, which is, it's unfortunate, but I even some of the more messed up things in this game I forgot as time went on. There's just so many great things like that in this game, but I really like the kind of oppressive atmosphere this game has, where you're constantly under pressure to, finish the game because there's a time limit on it. I like how antagonistic the game is. It's almost like it's mocking the player, and it makes it feel really satisfying when you finally finish the game. I actually think a lot of people say Link doesn't have much character. I think this game, more than any other, really fleshes out Link in a very strange way, especially because like the way he deals with and reacts to all the stuff in this game, it's pretty subtle too. Like, you'll see him getting upset and crying and like running away in fear from things. Like, I don't know, I think this game actually fleshes out Link too, which is pretty cool. But obviously it introduced Majora, who is to this day probably my favorite villain in the series. I'm kind of sad they haven't brought him back, but at the same time I'm kind of glad they haven't, because they'd probably mess him up and say he's like the spawn of demise or something dumb like that. But Majora's Mask, I highly recommend it. Again, if you're pretty young, you might find it archaic. It has a lot of the same faults that Ocarina of Time has, but I don't know, I love Majora's Mask, so I'm going to put it in the good category. I think it still holds up, and I think I like it better than Ocarina of Time too. Like, in terms of how well it holds up. Like, I can look at Ocarina of Time nowadays and be like, despite the fact I love this game, it's clearly broken and has problems. Whereas Majora's Mask, I have a harder time seeing the problems in it whenever I kind of go back to it. I think it holds up a lot better than the first one for some reason that I can't really articulate. But yeah, I like that one. So let's go to the Oracle games. The Oracle games I actually didn't play until a little bit later. I remember seeing them, I think, in Toys R Us when they first came out, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, maybe I'll get those. And I just never got them, and they kind of disappeared from all the store shelves everywhere for years. And then years later, I think it was on a family trip to Las Vegas. We stopped at some restaurant on the way to Las Vegas, and there was a GameStop there that I walked in, and they had the Oracle games there for really cheap. And I'm like, holy crap, there's the Oracle games. So I got them and I played them, and I really, really love these two games. However, I'm going to put an asterisk on it because I love them for the same reasons I used to love Link's Awakening. So I refuse to go back and replay these games because I have a feeling that if I replayed them this day and age, I actually would not enjoy them as much. I suspect I would find them a lot goofier nowadays than I used to, and I'd probably be put off by that. So these games, I'm speaking entirely off of my memory from almost 20 years ago. I really enjoyed them. I do consider them kind of the same game that you can just kind of play in, a variable order. I know that Oracle of Seasons is more combat focused and Ages is more puzzle focused, but to me they feel like just an extension of the same game. I like them both the same. They both have pretty awesome dungeons. They have awesome music. Like I would say the Game Boy Zelda games in general, like these two, Link's Awakening and Minish Cap, all have like the best soundtrack in the entire series. Like the music in these games easily trumps like all the music from the 3D games and the older ones too. So I love the music in these games. The Tarm Ruins is probably my favorite melody in the whole series. So yeah, I love these games. I don't think I would love them as much as I do if I went back and played them. So I'll never go back and play these ones. But I'd put them in the decent category. If you don't mind like the wackier kind of tone, you'll probably enjoy these two games. If you're like me and you like the more messed up Zelda games, you'll probably be put off by that. But even despite that, I remember the dungeons just being really, really clever. The puzzles were great. Onyx and Varen, they're not really great villains, but they're kind of memorable. I just like the fact that there even is like different villains, even though they end up being loosely connected to Ganon. But yeah, I like the Oracle games. Hopefully that opinion won't be changed, but it might someday if I ever play them again. Anyway, Four Swords. As I mentioned earlier, this was actually the first time I was able to play A Link to the Past in its fullest form. Four Swords, however, I wasn't able to play until I think 2 or 3 years after I'd got this game because I didn't have any friends that played Legend of Zelda. And then eventually I stumbled on a friend that actually had this game and like, oh, let's play it. So we did, and we went through Four Swords, and I honestly can't really say much about it. It's just kind of a... I mean, I like Vaati a lot, but I feel like the other games he's in did a better job fleshing him out and whatever. And this is the first appearance of Vaati, so I'm not surprised that he's kind of just like a floating eyeball with almost no personality in this game. But it's not... I hesitate really giving this one a rank. It's just kind of there. If you have some friends and you're a rabid Zelda fan, you'll probably enjoy playing this, although I think the sequel is far superior. But yeah, I don't even know how I'd rank this one. I don't even think I'm gonna put it on this list because it's just kind of there. It's just like a fun little distraction with nothing really interesting in it other than the novelty of a multiplayer Zelda game, which I don't think happened before this. I'm pretty sure that's the first time there is a multiplayer Zelda thing ever. But Four Swords, meh. I won't even put that one on the list. Wind Waker. I don't hate this game. That's probably the best thing I could say about it. Even when this game first came out, I think I got to, it was the Forsaken Fortress, and there's that stealth segment in it. And the dumb kid that I was, I couldn't get past the stealth segment, so I just kind of put it off for years. And eventually I ended up beating it. I actually beat this game before Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Although I forgot to mention, Link's Awakening is actually one of the first video games I ever completed, like got to the end credits and completed. The first one was Star Fox 64, but yeah, so that was a little bit of a tangent. But Wind Waker, I don't like it, but I don't hate it. I'm probably going to end up just putting it in the meh category. I don't like the toon art style. I'm kind of glad the toon art style has gone away. I don't like it. This game has some of the weakest dungeons in the series, I think. Countless people have said the sailing sucks. I agree. It's a very boring game. That's probably the best way to describe it. It's like you're going on this grand seas adventure and you get kind of excited when you first get the boat and you're going across the ocean. And then eventually you kind of realize, oh, this is all I do in between the dungeons. There's very particular things in the game that I do like. I like the backstory to Ganondorf a lot in this game. I think of all the Zelda games in the series, this one has done the most for Ganondorf as a character, which is another reason I'm not really fond of some of the later games in the series. They've completely kind of retconned and ruined his character, for lack of a better term. This game, on the other hand, really went into it. Really kind of made him borderline sympathetic. I'd actually say it did make him sympathetic, which is, I don't know, I thought that was a really good direction for Ganondorf. But so that's one thing about this game I really like, is Ganondorf in particular. I like the Rito. I don't like their designs. I actually think the designs for the Rito are far superior in Breath of the Wild, but I like the Rito culture a lot. I kind of like the Koroks. I like the idea that the Kokiri from Ocarina of Time became like these plant spirit creature things. So there's a lot of ideas in this game I really like. I just don't like the execution. I feel like with a different coat of paint, some different dungeons, and some tweaks here and there, I probably would like this game a lot more, but as it stands, it's just kind of like it's kind of mediocre. I think this game is grossly overrated. Although, fun fact, until they remade this game on the the Wii U, if you looked at the sales numbers for this game, it actually did not sell very well, which kind of surprised me because a lot of people seem to absolutely adore this game. So I was surprised looking up the numbers for this game back before the HD version came out. It didn't sell very well, which is, I've later found out in an interview, that's why they actually made Twilight Princess. Because at the time when this game came out, I wasn't on the internet, so I didn't know about the whole, backlash against it or whatever, but I didn't know the Space World demo was a thing. This game just kind of came out, and I was like, oh, I'll try it. That looks interesting, and it ended up not being that interesting. But this game actually didn't do very well. I think it barely sold 1 million copies, which isn't bad, but most of the Zelda games, except for a few like Majora's Mask and some of the 2D ones, they usually sell well over 1 million copies. So that kind of surprised me when I found out this game didn't sell very well, considering how loved it is this day and age. But I don't like this game, and it's not because of the art style. I don't think the art style helps it. I personally don't like the art style. I never want to see it in another Zelda game again. It looks like they've finally gotten rid of it. But regardless of the way it looks, I think there's a lot of things in the game that just... ugh. Even the music I don't really like that much, so I'm just gonna put it in the meh category. I'll never play it again. I don't recommend it to anyone. I don't even know if I'd recommend it to kids. A few years ago, I tried to introduce this game to my youngest sister, who at the time, I think she was 7 or 8. She was still a kid, so I thought she'd enjoy it, and she couldn't even get past Outset Island before she was just bored to death. So I don't recommend Wind Waker. If you do like this game, I'm not gonna punch you in the face for liking this game. There's things in it I like, so I don't blame people that do like this game. I just don't like it. Four Sword Adventures, on the other hand, I'm probably one of the only people in the world who actually loves this game. And it has the freaking, the toon art style. I absolutely love this game, which might come as a surprise to some people, but there's a lot of things in this game that I think are great ideas that I'm kind of sad have not appeared in later Zelda games. My favorite idea that shows up in this game is you actually fight, and you kind of get the impression from the cover here, you actually fight hundreds of enemies at a time in this game. You are fighting entire battalions of knights and enemies, and it's just awesome. I remember when I first played this game, and the first time you stumble into like 50 of these guys on screen at once, and they're just all charging at you. I thought that was such a cool thing, and that's probably one of the things that like injected the idea of like armies in the Legend of Zelda into my head that kind of later led to me making an RTS. But this game is actually really great. It's by no means a traditional Zelda game because it's broken up in kind of like arcade levels. Whereas instead of like an overworld and you're going from dungeon to dungeon, it's kind of segmented into a bunch of these different little levels, and they're all pretty great. They have pretty good puzzles. It's really well thought out for a multiplayer game too. It feels like they took everything from the first bland Four Swords and just went crazy with it. My only real problem with this game is it has a incredibly bizarre control scheme, kind of like the Nintendo does a bunch of really weird things that make no sense, and the kind of control thing they do where you have to look down at the Game Boy Advance and plug it in, and when you're inside caves and stuff is really, really strange. I think that's like the one blight on this game. But otherwise, it's a pretty solid game. If you can get multiple people to play this game, I highly recommend it. The bosses in this game are pretty great. I actually, I don't know if I want to say it's the art style, but like there's something about like the graphics of this game that are really, really cool. Like it feels kind of like a Link to the Past, but it has like these really like it has a really good I guess all the sprites just have a lot of frames in them. Like the particle effects especially are really cool looking in this game. So yeah, Four Sword Adventure is very underrated. I was going to put it in the decent category, but I might actually put it in the good category. As I'm thinking about it, I'm liking this game more and more, so I think I'll put it in the good category. I also like that they brought Vaati back. He's a pretty good villain. So yeah, I might shock people, and I'm going to put it in the good category. Not only was this game pretty good, it even fleshed out the lore. You get the backstory to Ganon's trident. Like, that's such a simple thing. They actually bothered to like show you how his trident was like made and buried in the Pyramid of Power or whatever. Like they create an entire race of people called the Zuna, and you find out they basically manufactured this like weapon of power for Ganon and whatnot. So that's so funny how this silly little like multiplayer spin-off game like actually fleshed out like the backstory to the series. That's really funny to me considering how things are nowadays. But yeah, Four Sword Adventures, it's a great game. Very underrated. I understand why people don't like it, but I don't think it's as bad as because when it came out, I remember a lot of even like Game Informer I think gave it like a 7, which isn't a bad score, mind you, but usually Zelda games like just unfairly get like 10 out of 10 out of 10. This is like the one Zelda game until Triforce Heroes that got docked down and was considered less than perfect when it came out. But anyway, I think I've gushed about that game enough. I like Four Sword Adventures. I recommend it, especially if you have some friends to play it with. Minish Cap. Kind of like Link's Awakening and the two Oracle games. I absolutely loved this game when I first played it. I suspect if I went back and played it again, I would not like it. But I don't know. I'm going to go based off my memories because I have not played this game since probably 2005. I really like it. I think the kind of the Wind Waker art style works better with sprites. So actually the kind of visual presentation of this game is a lot better than Wind Waker. I think Vaati's a pretty great villain. Kind of sad that they've abandoned him. He has a lot of personality for I was gonna say he's an obscure villain, but he actually isn't. He's appeared in quite a few Zelda games, but he's a great villain. This game, even though my favorite melody is from Oracle of Seasons, this game overall I think has the best soundtrack in the entire series. The music in this game is absolutely amazing. I still listen to it to this day. I try to have Adam do a lot of melodies from this game in Hyrule Conquest any chance he gets. This game just has a great soundtrack. So even if you don't like this game, I suspect you'll probably like the music in it at the very least. Again, if you're not put off by the goofier games in the series, you'll probably enjoy this one. I loved it when I first played it. I probably wouldn't like it again, but if I played it again. But Going off of my memories of nostalgia, I'm going to put it in the decent category. I'm cautiously wary of playing this game again. Alright, and now Twilight Princess. So anyone who is even passably familiar with me knows that this is my favorite Zelda game. I personally think this is where the series peaked. This was the proper direction to go in. I mean, you can debate me if it was the proper direction to go in. That's fine. If you don't like this game, like I said with one of the other games, I'm not gonna punch you if you don't like this game. I'm friends with several people that personally hate this game. One in particular has a hatred for Agatha that I find amusing, but I love this game. The art style I think is the best in the series. I'm sad it's probably not going to show up again in the future, at least not the foreseeable future, especially after the other day. I love the tone of this game. I love the dungeons. I love this version of Hyrule. Midna herself is probably like the best character in the entire series. Like, she has a complete character arc. She's just absolutely loaded with personality, and I would say in terms of video games in general, she's one of the best characters in like almost any video game I've ever played. Like, she's worthy of being in a movie. But yeah, it's a great game. The only thing I don't like about this game is the music. I actually think this game has one of the worst soundtracks in the entire series, which is, I know, deeply ironic considering how much I gush and love this game. It actually, I think, has one of the worst soundtracks. And I only found this out years later, but Koji Kondo actually did not do the music for he didn't do the music for this game. I later found out he tried to push for real instruments, and they were like, nah, we're just gonna do MIDI. And then they got some other guy to do the music, and I can't for the life of me remember his name. So yeah, I don't know if that's why the music's bad. I blame it on just I guess maybe because I was spoiled, because a lot of games at this time were actually using orchestrated instruments, and the quality of music was just getting really good in video games, and the soundtrack in this game felt extremely dated. And on top of that, there's no excuse for it, because other Nintendo games around this time were starting to use orchestrated soundtracks. Super Mario Galaxy did. Star Fox Assault did, although that soundtrack isn't particularly good, but they're actually using, a real orchestra. And freaking Super Smash Brothers of all games had, a live orchestra doing the music. So I thought that was incredibly bizarre, that considering how high the production values were for this game, the music felt so outdated and cheap in it. But that's really my only complaint about this game that I won't defend is the music. I don't like the music. Even most of the melodies I don't find particularly engaging. I kind of like the melody for the track when you fight King Bulblin, but other than that, most of the music in this game can just go screw off. I don't like the music in this game. But everything else, fantastic. What else can I say about it other than just like kind of gush over it like a fanboy? I actually think the GameCube version is superior. I played the Wii version when it first came out. In retrospect, I think the GameCube version's actually better though. I'm not sure if I can even articulate why. Just something about it feels better. It might just be something as subtle as the fact that the little Navi pointer isn't floating around the screen. Or maybe it's just because I'm so used to Hyrule being flipped around the other direction, and something feels uncomfortable and off by the fact that everything's mirrored in the Wii version. I actually think the HD version of this game it kind of ruins it a little bit, especially graphically. They got rid of like all the cast shadows in the HD remake. The faces of characters look even more bizarre than the original in the remake. Like, if you look at Aylia's face in the remake, her face like looks like a duck. I don't know, they completely screwed up the HD version of this game. So I kind of refuse to play the remake, but I love the original one. The Tweely in particular, their entire aesthetic and design is just. I was talking earlier about how like a lot of the older Zelda games before they started introducing like their own original ideas, it kind of just felt like generico fantasy number 500, where it just felt like kind of a mix of Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons and just all of these kind of unoriginal fantasy things. Twilight Princess, I think, has done one of the better jobs, kind of just injecting something you haven't really seen in other fantasy stuff, like the Tweely. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that resembles a Tweely nowadays, but when this game came out years ago, there's really nothing like the Tweely. At least that I'm aware of. If there's other things that you feel like the Tweely ripped off that I'm unaware of, go ahead and let me know. That predates this game, obviously, but just wonderfully creative game. I love how dreamlike and surreal this game feels too. It's pretty cool. I highly recommend it to anyone. Although a lot of people don't like it, so you might actually not like this game. Personally, I think it's my favorite. The series peaked with it and hasn't really recovered since. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this one in the good category. Obviously. I'll even go ahead and give it a little Nephy's star of approval. So there, it gets the Nephy star of best in the series. There we go. So yeah, Twilight Princess, favorite game in the series. Best story too, best character, S in parentheses. Now we get to where things started to falter. Although, when I first played Phantom Hourglass, I actually liked this game quite a bit. I didn't really kind of see through the cracks because I guess I was still kind of like one of those. I was kind of like a wide-eyed fanboy at this point. I kind of like saw past the faults and was just excited to play a Zelda thing. But one thing I do remember when I first played this game that felt off was how obnoxiously easy this game was. I breezed through it, and I remember back then being like, that was weird. I'm kind of surprised I got through this game so fast. And I kind of chalked it up to the fact that maybe like I just played so many Zelda games that I was just getting really good at them. But in retrospect, I actually think that it's just that this game is where the cracks in the series start to form, and then the game after this like starts to drive a wedge through everything. But anyway, I'll talk about the positive things first. Kind of like Majora's Mask, to a lesser degree Twilight Princess. I like the fact that this game had a villain completely unconnected to Ganondorf, although Zant was connected to Ganondorf, so I guess TP isn't a good example. But I like games that where there's closure and kind of finality. For the previous game, because this one's a sequel to Wind Waker, so they could have easily just dug Ganondorf up again and went with him, but they're like, we shoved a sword in his face, he's gone, we're moving on, we're moving to new pastures, new villains, new enemies, whatever. So I like the fact that the series introduced Bellum, and even if Bellum was connected in some way, I like the concept of Bellum. I like the fact that he's not like an intelligent I don't even think he's sentient. He's just a big, giant, dumb animal, basically. He's like Godzilla. He's just this huge squid that just comes out of the ocean and, does his damage to the world. So I kind of liked that. I like that you're basically fighting a kind of a force of nature in this game. So I like Bellum as an antagonist. I think graphically this game is absolutely ugly. It takes like all the worst aspects of the Wind Waker game and makes them even worse, because at least with the Wind Waker game, like, it looked kind of nice on the GameCube, whereas in Phantom Hourglass everything looks super polygonal and just really stupid. I realize the DS is kind of a it's like a cheap little handheld system, so I guess I can't really hold them too much. I can't really hold that against them too much, but I think this game looks incredibly ugly. This game is incredibly easy for me anyway, so if you've never played this game and you start playing it, you might find it a breeze to get through. Nothing really interesting happens in this game, although Linebeck's kind of a nice character. He kind of has quite a bit of personality. He even has a bit of a character arc, kind of like Midna. But other than that, this game's pretty unremarkable. I'm probably gonna end up putting it in the meh category. Even when I played it, I wasn't thrilled about it. I felt like something was slightly off, but I kind of like just ignored it and put it in the back of my head until the sequel to this came out, which is the next game we're getting to. So I'll be nice and put it in meh. Unremarkable. It's not the worst thing ever. However, its sequel, Spirit Tracks, is the worst thing. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the worst thing ever, but I kind of despise this game, and this is the first game that kind of made me raise an eyebrow and feel like, I think something's off about the series. And that definitely came to be when I played this game. The nicest way I can put it is it feels like this game was made for babies. And I later found out that the director of this game, I was reading an interview from him a few years after this game came out, and apparently he specifically made this game for his 8-year-old son, so I'm not going to fault him for making a game for his child, but I just don't like the game, mainly for just a lot of the wacky ideas in it. I think the train is just the dumbest thing ever to show up in the series. It does not fit at all in like a medieval fantasy thing, although as we continue on with this list, the whole idea of the medieval fantasy is just gonna get fucking tossed out the window. But this is kind of where it all started for me. Leaving the kind of medieval sword and sorcery thing behind, throwing in, the trains. I think the phantom armor thing is kind of a cool idea. I just would have liked it to have appeared in a better game, like a Twilight Princess sequel. That would have been awesome if, they'd made a sequel to Twilight Princess and it had like that kind of art style and like the Ghost of Zelda's and like this giant hulking armor that's just slaughtering enemies. That would have been so cool. Unfortunately, we'll probably never get that, but so there's one or two nice ideas in this game, but overall, it's just not for me. I think it was kind of the wrong direction to go in. Obviously, I'm not in its target demographic, so I probably wasn't gonna like it anyway. But I don't like this game. I like the overworld theme. The music that plays when you're driving around on the train is pretty catchy and great. Overall, the music's pretty lame though. Bosses are lame. Dungeons are kind of lame. It's just lame. I'm putting this game in. Actually, no. I was gonna put it in the lame category, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the bad category. I don't recommend this game. If you're like, and I don't mean this in like a derogatory way, but if you're like a 5-year-old child, I don't know why you're listening to this video if you're 5 years old. But if you're like a 5-year-old child, you might enjoy this game. I know people that enjoy this game that aren't 5-year-old children, so maybe you'll like it, but I recommend staying away from it. It's a very stupid game. This is a silly game. Skyward Sword. Let me get a drink here before I rant about this game. All right. Skyward Sword is bad. No, anyway, I'll go into a bit more detail. Actually, I have a pretty big podcast with Deox and several other people that, if you want a lot of details to why I absolutely hate this game, look up that podcast. I think it's called, I don't remember what it's called. It's the first podcast I actually ever did. Me and Deox and Wind Waker, we kind of go into details to why this game kind of sucks. I The only thing about this game I can honestly say I like is the design for Fee or Fi, however you want to pronounce it. I call her Fee because it's more comfortable to say, but it's such a great design for a character. I'm so sad it's been wasted on one of the worst characters in a Zelda game I've ever played, but this game sucks. I think graphically it is ugly as sin. I will fight anyone who thinks this game looks gorgeous. It looks terrible. Not all the music's bad. The Koloktos music's actually pretty good in this game. Most of the music is pretty terrible though and feels kind of cheap. Girahim is one of the worst antagonists in the entire series. He's basically a Team Rocket villain. Demise is a little more cool, but you don't really learn anything about him in the game, so he's kind of just like a giant question mark. Like, okay, Demise is a thing. Demise utterly ruins the backstory of Ganondorf with his curse, although in the Japanese version of the game there's not a curse, so I don't know. This game, as I was saying earlier, like the kind of modern era of Zelda games, they kind of just like toss rules and lore out the window and just do whatever they want. This was the first game that really was just like, you know the whole origin of the Master Sword where the sages made it, and the three goddesses and all that. Yeah, fuck that. Here's Hylia. She made the Master Sword. They just ejected all the backstory, and this game, I honestly would consider it a reboot. There's so many things it changes about the backstory of the series that it really feels like the start of an entirely new thing. I don't like this game. I'm very, very tempted to say it is the worst game of the series, although I'm quickly feeling like another game is worse than it as time goes on, but this one is bad. I don't recommend it to anyone. I would get this. I wouldn't even wish this game on my enemies. Although there's quite a few people that like it. When it came out, a lot of people liked it. Although I do find it really funny that if you kind of like browse on YouTube, if you look up like kind of Skyward Sword opinions nowadays, most people don't like this game anymore. A lot of people, I think, as time goes on, are realizing, yeah, that one kind of sucked. So that's I feel a little bit vindicated. But anyway, A Link Between Worlds. I know that I have said negative things about this game, and in a unpopular video that I released a few days ago, I kind of made it seem like I didn't really like this game, and I wouldn't say I like this game that much, but I actually think this is probably the best one that has come out since Phantom Hourglass, in kind of the sort of era of degeneration of the franchise. This one's probably the best one. It does feel like kind of a proper sequel to Link's Awakening, which is nice, even though it tosses some of the rules out the window that this game set in place and contradicts them, which bothers me, but whatever, it's too late for that. There's no rules in the series anymore, so whatever. I'll just try and enjoy whatever I can. My main problem with the series is just the kind of tone of it. It's a little wacky. I don't really like that. I don't know if people like it because of that. I'm not going to punch you in the face. You can like it. I think the puns in this game are pretty bad. Could someone answer me this question? So Lorule is like an opposite world of Hyrule, and I get the pun. It's called low because Hyrule has high in the name. It's high, like elevation. I'm guessing it's called Lorule because it's low in elevation, whatever. It's an incredibly stupid pun. I don't even know how that works in Japanese, but it's a mirror world of Hyrule, and Hyrule and the Hylians are supposedly named after the goddess Hylia. So answer me this. Is there some parallel goddess in the Zelda universe called Lolia? Like, I don't know. See, this is the problem with, this is like the Last Jedi problem, where you want to, throw in these silly little jokes that, because you didn't think about it for longer than 5 seconds, it, opens up this huge can of worms. So, based on the rules established in Skyward Sword and the rules established in this game, there is a hypothetical goddess floating around called Lolia, and I just think that's just very amusing. But in terms of pure gameplay, this game really isn't that bad. I can't really say too many bad things about it. I think it's a little wacky, but the entire series is kind of like that at this point, so whatever. It's decent, but I never really want to play it again, and I don't really like it, so I kind of want to put it in like this awkward space in between decent and meh, but I think I'm leaning more towards meh. It's okay. Hyrule Warriors. This game is really dumb. I don't know what else to say about it, other than rants, and I don't really want to rant too much in this video. Lana's dumb. Linkle's dumb. Link grabbing the planet with the mold mitts and like throwing it all over the place is dumb. Hookshotting the moon and pulling it out of orbit is dumb. This game is just kind of dumb. It kind of has like a Power Rangers vibe to it, where things are just insanely over the top. It's kind of like I said in another video the other day that I don't. Never mind. This game's dumb. I'll just put it in the lame category. If you like really, really over the top and kind of like insane, wacky things, kind of like Power Rangers, you'll probably actually enjoy this game. So I recommend it for that crowd. Obviously, if you like Dynasty Warriors, you'll probably love this game. I think this game's incredibly stupid. I don't like it. I got enjoyment out of it though. I actually had gotten this game and I played through it with my sister, and we were just laughing the whole time. Just there's one point where I was just in tears at how funny it was. There's actually the scene when Midna is looking when Midna realizes that Saya and Lana are the same person. She's like looking back and forth between their faces, and she's like, "Wait, you're the same person." And then my girlfriend was just like, no, Midna, that's just how all faces look at anime. And I don't know. I thought that was really funny. I was laughing so hard at that I was in tears. So at the very least, I could say I got a lot of enjoyment out of this game, despite the fact that I kind of hate it. So it's one of those games where it's like so bad it's kind of good. It like kind of has like this horseshoe effect where it's actually entertaining to participate in it, despite the fact that it's so dumb. So yeah, I don't like it. I'll never play it again. I kind of laugh and scoff at it. Whatever. It's a spin-off. Whatever. Triforce Heroes is a myth. So that brings us to Breath of the Wild. I really don't want to be like harsh on this game. It's safe to say right off the top I don't like this game, and as time goes on I'm liking it less so for like the actual game itself and more so for kind of like the kind of like culture behind it and the fact that like the kind of zeitgeist of the gaming industry right now is like, oh, this is the best thing ever made. I don't agree at all. I think this game is disgustingly overrated. Like, again, if you like this game, that's fine. I understand why you would like this game. You know, it's got the Zelda characters you like. They finally shook up the formula. It's like a big open world game. You can see this big kind of realized Hyrule. There's a bunch of weapons and stuff. I get it. I get why people like this game. I just feel like, and maybe this is just because the game is still kind of new, because Skyward Sword was like this when it came out, and now most people are pretty honest about a lot of the shit in Skyward Sword. So maybe in 10 years, probably longer than 10 years, because now they're making a sequel to this game. Maybe in 10 years, people will look back on this and be like, yeah, this game visually was kind of ugly. I don't know why I said this game was beautiful. There's fog everywhere. It's blurry, and the colors are actually kind of muddy. I suspect maybe as time goes on and this game becomes more distant, and people are able to look back at it more objectively, especially if they make better games in the future. I think this game is going to be remembered as kind of like a weird tech demo. So I don't like this game. I have a video where I go on for about I think an hour and a half as to more specific reasons why I don't like this game. Oh, kitty, you're interrupting me. Say hi to the world, kitty cat. Anyway, that's just the cat interrupting the video, so I apologize for that. But anyway, she's disagreeing with me. Do you disagree with me, kitty? Do you think Breath of the Wild is the best game ever? You think Breath of the Wild is the best game ever? I disagree with you, kitty cat. Anyway, this game kind of sucks. I don't like the kind of like the sort of spazzy culture around it. I think it's disgustingly overrated. And yeah, I'm kind of dreading its sequel. I think I'll probably pass on the sequel. Yes, I know you disagree with me, kitty cat. Meow. Do you like Breath of the Wild that much that you want to keep interrupting my video? Anyway, I actually didn't even finish this game, so I'll never go back and finish it. I'm gonna pass on the sequel unless for some reason there's something in the sequel I find out that like really like grips me. Which I highly doubt will happen. I'm gonna pass on the sequel. I'm never gonna finish this game, and I'm gonna put it in bad. I was gonna put it in lame. I actually, if you asked me my opinion on this game like a year and a half ago, I would even just put it in meh. But I'm kind of getting really sick of the culture around this game, and it's making me dislike it as time goes on. So I'm gonna put it in bad. I can appreciate the fact that they tried to shake up the formula, but I don't like it. I don't like the voiceovers in this game. I think Nintendo of America did an absolutely terrible job with most of the English voiceovers. The European ones, like the Russian ones, okay. The various European languages sound better. The voices are bad in this game. In particular, Princess Zelda and Mipha. I think it's probably a meme now that I absolutely hate Princess Zelda's voice in this game. My apologies to Patricia Somerset. You're a decent actress. You were fine in Helix, but you I'm sorry you failed with the princess. What else do I not like about this game? I think the game is ugly. I'm honestly kind of baffled at how many people seem to think this game is visually gorgeous. It's pretty ugly. The music in this game is terrible. There's tons of little gameplay things in it that bother me, but I don't like it. This game, I think, is what finally kind of like killed the magic for me. What made me, well, no, it was more so the announcement of the sequel, which I can't really say much about because I haven't played it and I don't really know much about it. But when I realized they were doing a direct sequel to this game, it kind of just finally was. I was like, okay, this is just another franchise. There's nothing beyond this other than it's just a bunch of video games. So yeah, Breath of the Wild 2, I'm going to pass on, so I'll probably never actually give it, a score. I'm not even going to bother playing it. So yeah, that's kind of my general opinion of the series. I used to love this franchise, and now I don't. I feel like the games have kind of just gone off into a bunch of weird directions. They've kind of ruined everything that they were building up for. Let's see, Ocarina of Time came out, what was it, 98, and Twilight Princess was 2006. So for almost a decade, yeah, they were kind of building up this franchise, and then they kind of just were like, nah, we're just going to do whatever after. I don't like that. I don't really appreciate that. And it looks like they're probably going to keep making sequels for a game I could not even bring myself to finish for the foreseeable future. So I suspect that in the best case scenario, I will probably be taking a break from this franchise and maybe returning to it later and seeing how it is. But I don't know. I don't like it anymore. I just can't get myself excited. So, I mean, that doesn't mean I'm still working on Hyrule Conquest. I'm having a blast working on it, which reminds me, I should have a video on the mercenaries sometime in the next few days. And then I'll probably release the next version publicly. I want to say like the first week of July. Exodarian's on vacation right now, so we wanted to do some balancing stuff, and he won't be back for like another week, so it's probably not going to come out till July, but I don't know, we'll see. Either way, stay tuned for a video about the mercenaries, which I'm kind of happy with how most of the mercenary units turned out. But anyway, if you agree with me, cool. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. The only thing I ask is if you absolutely like just love everything about these games, just be honest about them. If you love Breath of the Wild, that's fine, but can we at least be honest that it's not like the best thing ever created by mankind? Can we not like be like falling apart in tears at the fact that there's a sequel to it? Like it's not that great, guys. It really isn't. But anyway, if you disagree with me, go ahead and yell at me in the comments, whatever. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more Hyrule Conquest stuff. And I hope you guys all have a good one.